This is Gemara Megillah Daf Lamed. All learning should be a tremendous chashidach. Yisrachaim the verse Shemir Rasi is a good and this Shanamag Mordechai B'Savashinta Skip B'Savashinta Shema Ben Chai Shalom Levi Zahav. They find their shidduch B'Karav Mamish as well as all the learning should be a tremendous chus for Shlema for Michal Mordechai Ben Nechama Leah Miriam Gabriela Bas Bluma Yisrael Yitzchak Ben Dina Rafral Avram Ben Rachel Adei Shimshon Ben Chana Ragal Beryl Bas Esther Shmuel Yosef and Rafei the Ram Vega Chaim Sar Shalom Zim Reza Zar Bas Kenan Dita Basim Bas Chayso Yisrael Ben Mendel Yazber to the Shalei Shalom Bas Nami V'Shavik Shechana Shmuel Ben Til Din Mechan Reis Ben Chai Basina Dinena V'Shemina Zviv Veg Vern Chaveli Tzviv and Fegid Ver Rivka V'Shem Zazim Lester Amram Ben Yaakov Yitzhar Bas Kila Shalom Ben Yisachar Shalom Yisachar Ben Esi Yehudis B'Soy Shar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding in the very very bottom of Chav Testament B, the final home stretch, the final few days of this incredible Masechta Megillah. It's time to revamp. It's time for everyone to try to gather up a friend as a new Masechta again. Baruch Hashem is on the horizon starting on Friday. But for now, let's get to it. The bottom of Chav Testament B, 2 lines from the bottom, says the Gemara Itmar Chaliyos V'Va'ata Tetzaveh. That if what happens, we're in the middle of discussing the parsha of Shkolim, let's see the parsha of Shkolim falls out in the parsha of Ata Tetzaveh. Omer Rav Yitzchak Navcha explains Rav Yitzchak Navcha, what do? Karishita mevata Tetzaveh akisisa. You read 6 aliyos until kisisa, v'chan mevchitisa ad v'asisa, and then 1 towards the end. So you have 6, and the last one is going to be this parsha of Shkolim. Omer Abaye, but comes like Abaye, and Abaye says, we turn over to today's Daf Lamed Amar Aleph. Amri Akumi Udikam Akaimi Azam. Says Abaye, 1 second. How could you say that? People are going to think that it's just reading straight, because you're taking the regular parsha and you're just, instead of reading 7 aliyah, it's reading 6, and the last aliyah is shkalim. But it looks like, what are you doing? It looks like all you're doing is reading the regular parsha. Like if you see in the Tab Rashi says kalaimar, which kalaimar always means the words aren't literal. In a davar nikar l'shem parsha shkalim, you can't tell that what you're doing is parsha shkalim. It just looks like you're finishing the parsha of Tetzaveh. Elamar Abaye comes like Abaye and he says, Karishita meviata tetzaveh adva sisa. Says Abaye, read the whole parsha, 6 aliyahs, and then go back 1 aliyah, as Rashi says, Chayzer v'shayne, v'chatani v'kari mev'chisisa adva sisa, and then go back, read the final aliyah of parsha Shkolim, the 7th, as you redo the last aliyah. Meisvei asked the Gemara, 1 second, Chaliyos v'parsha Smuchala. We learned in a brayso that if the lady for Shkolim fell in a parsha close to it, what do you do? You read it and you double. So says the Gemara, we just had a machlokes. So Abaye, who is the second opinion, who we just learned a moment ago, that said you double it up. Beautiful. It's exactly what the brayso says. He said, what do? You lane 6 and then the last aliyah is shkalim. What's going on? We see clearly that you double it up. Wait, even according to Abaye, you have a problem. Why? Because you're right that if it's beforehand, then it's the exact case of Abaye. Then it's a beautiful raya that you double it up. But what's the case that you have the parsha shkalim and the parsha after it? What are you forced to explain? The brayso kaifla b'shabasais must mean you go back to parsha 2 weeks in a row. Chanami kaifla b'shabasais. So Abaye and Rav Yitzchak Navcha, we do not have a clear consensus as to what is the appropriate thing to do in such a situation. Now says the Gemara, 6 lines from the white lines. Let's say the parsha of Shkolim falls out on the parsha of Kisisa itself, and of course this only could happen back at a time that they did not have a set calendar, and there was more of a fluctuation. Then it can fall out on Kisisa. Amar Rav Yitzchak Navcha, what do? Karishita min vasisa ad vayikal v'chad, and the end of that parsha kari min chesisa ad vasisa. Masklar Abaye, the exact same kasha. Ashta amri lemafreu dekari, not the same, very similar. Because excuse me, I read that wrong. Rav Yitzchak Navcha said you skip the first part of the parsha, then you read 6 aliyos, and then you go back and read the first part of the parsha, which is the parsha of Shkolim. Frekt Abaye, Masklar Abaye, but it looks like you're reading backwards. How can you do that? Answers the Gemara, Elamar Abaye. Answers the Gemara, Elamar Abaye in the last narrow line. Karishita ad vayikov v'chatani v'kari mechasisa ad v'asisa, says Abaye. What do? You double it up like he said before. Tani kavose d'Abaye, we have a clear raya chaliyas b'chasisa atzma karnas avikovel, and I saw the Bryce says explicitly like Abaye. What do? You read it and you double it up. Says the Gemara on the second white line, now we deal with what happens if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on Shabbos itself. Excuse me, incorrect. Chal liyois b'soich haShabbos. There it is. It fell out during the week. Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out during the week. What do you do right now? Says the Mar Makdimin l'Shabbos sha'avra. What do? You read Shkolim a week early, then you have a break, and then you read Zachar. Explains the Gemara. Itmar Rosh Chodesh Adar shchal liyos be'erev Shabbos. Now we're going to go into the particulars exactly when Rosh Chodesh is falling and exactly what we're going to do in each scenario. So says the Gemara, Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on Friday. We have a machlekes. Rav Amar Makdimin, Shmuel Amar Me'achron. Rav says you read Shkolim the week before, and Shmuel says no, read it the next day. You read Parsha Shkolim. Explains the Gemara. Rav Amar Makdim din kein batzilu yom shulchanes. Says Rav, remember what we said yesterday. The reason why we're reading Parsha Shkolim is so that we have at least 2 weeks before they set up the money changers in order so that they collect the Shkolim. Says Rav, if you don't read a week early, you know what's going to happen? You're not going to have enough time. If you don't read a week early, you're not going to have the 15 days, the 2-week requisite amount of days to be able to bring the Shkolim before the money changers come. Therefore, says Rav, you got to read it a week early. Shmuel Amar says Shmuel, no. Acharin, you read the week after. Amr Lacha, you know why? Saif, says Shmuel, do some math. If Rosh Chodesh Adar is on Friday, when's the 15th of Adar, the date that they set up the money changers, when is that going to be? Saif, that's going to end up being Chameser, the 15th will be B'mali Shabbat. Says Shmuel, you know what's going to happen the 15th as well? It's going to fall on an Erev Shabbos. And therefore, Makli V'Shachana is L'navki Archa B'Shabbat, and therefore the money changers themselves will be pushed off until Sunday. Helkach and therefore, if you read the Parsha Shkolim on the next day, you're going to still have your 2 weeks. Why? Because the money changers, anyways, are not going to come out exactly on the 15th. They're going to come out the next day on Sunday. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah 6 lines into the wide lines. Quote of the Mishnah, if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out during the week, you read Shkolim the week before, you take a break, and then you have Zachar. Asks the Gemara, my love is now referring to Afilu Be'erev Shabbos. We have a clear Mishnah. It says if Rosh Chodesh falls out during the week seemingly includes the entirety of the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So seemingly a clear proof to Rav that you do it a week earlier. Answers the Gemara, no, it means within the week, excluding Friday during the weekdays, but not on Friday. Tashima, we try again. What is considered the first Shabbos with regards to the Dalit Parshia? Is the 4 Shabbos of Shkolim Zachar Parana Chaydesh Kol Shechal Rosh Chodesh Adar Liyos B'Soicha. The week that has Rosh Chodesh Adar within it, Va'afilu be'erev Shabbos, and even if it falls on Erev Shabbos. So explains the Gemara, what does this brayso mean? My love, Va'afilu be'erev Shabbos dumya de'taicha. It sounds like it's Erev Shabbos, similar to if it fell out during the week. The ma'ataicha makdimin, just like if Rosh Chodesh Adar fell out during the week, we read an earlier Parsha Shkolim, Aver Shabbos makdimin. So seemingly we have a clear proof, like Rav again, that even if it's on Erev Shabbos, you read the week earlier. Amar Shmuel defends his position and says, no, it doesn't mean on Erev Shabbos, it means on it. Similarly, Shmuel, so too we change the words of the brayso to mean on which Rosh Chodesh Adar falls. And therefore, we no longer have a raya to Rav. And the Gemara now says, you have machlekes Rav and Shmuel. What happens when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on Friday? Rav says you go the week earlier. Shmuel says you do it the next day. Says the Gemara, Ketanoi. This machlekes Rav and Shmuel is indeed a machlekes Tanoim that says Misargin l'Shabbosais Divrei Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says, what do? We alternate the Shabbosais. So therefore, You can never have Shkolim and Zachar back to back. Anasi, excuse me. Shebet Lazar ein misargin. We do not alternate the parshiyos. Rather, we have Shkolim and then Zachar back to back. And this is going to be the machlekes Rav and Shmuel, as the Gemara is about to explain. If you hold there's a break in between, that's like Rav. You read Shkolim a week early, you have a break in the middle, then you have Zachar the next week. If you hold they could be consecutive back to back, then what do you have? You have like Shmuel that you read Shkolim the next day, followed the next week by Zachar. I think Gemara now elaborates on that which we just said. What is the case? Ani Omer, Ein Misargin. When is it not in order? Bisman Shachali is Erev Shabbos. You do it the week earlier. Avosman Shachali is Besoicha Shabbos Maktim Akarim Shabbos Sha'av Rav Bishu Shvat. Even though it's going to be Shvat, so now we have a clear brisa that's speaking out the fight between Rav and Shmuel when Rosh Chodesh falls on Friday. Do we do it the week before or do we do it the day after? And now we continue about 20 lines in the bottom, smack in the middle of these very wide lines. First word on line is Bishniya Zachar. What is the second of the special Parshiyos Shabbos HaZachar? Explains the Gemara Itmar. Purim Shechal Liyos Be'erev Shabbos. Purim that falls on a Friday. This has happened the last year in America. It happens this year, but that's not what the Gemara in Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara is talking about the 14th. Falls on Friday, as we will see. Rav Amar Makdimim says, Rav, when do we eat Parsha Zachar the week before? Makdimim Parsha Zachar, Shmuel Amar Machrin. Rav Amar Makdimim, why Kechadol take the Asiyah Lizchira? You don't want to have that. First you have the Asiyah, you first have Purim on Friday, and then it's Zechira, you're remembering Amalek. The next day on Shabbos, says Rav, no way. So you do it the week earlier. Shmuel Amar no Ma'achrin, you read it the day afterwards. Why? Amar Lachashbul explains, Kima the Ikam last year was a Purim Sholosh in Eretz Yisrael, so if outside of Eretz Yisrael, if the 14th is a Friday, there are places that on Shabbos itself is the 15th, like here in Yerushalayim. Asiro, Zechira, Badi, Adadi, Ka'asin, so then it's going to be simultaneous. The Asiya and the Zechira both is on Shabbos itself. Says the Gemara, Tanam, we learned in a Mishnah. Bishniya Zachar, the second Shabbos is Zachar. Ask the Gemara, Vaki Makli Rishercha B'Shabbos. But what happens when Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos? Like we explained in the Mishnah, then Mikla Purim Be'erev Shabbos. Then Purim falls out on Friday. Again, if Rosh Chodesh Adar is Shabbos, then Purim will be a Friday, the 14th. V'katani Bishniya Zachar, and yet we learned the second week is Zachar, which seemingly is like Rav. What's the second week of Rosh Chodesh Adar is Shkolim. The second week is Zachar. Sounds like Rav. That the 8th of Adar, the week before Rosh Chodesh, is going to be Zachar, not like Shmuel. Amar Abba no Raya my Shniya Lafsaka means the second week from when you pause, when you had that break, which is the next week according to Shmuel. The Gemara tries again. Tashema Ezu Shabbos Shniya. What's the second Shabbos? Kosh Chal Purim Liyos B'Seicha Va'afilu Erev Shabbos. Explicit. My love, Erev Shabbos to me the Teicha, just like we had this right a moment ago. Ma Teicha Makdimim, just like if it's during the week, you read the week prior. Have Erev Shabbos Makdimim. Again, a clear raya to Rav that a Purim falls on a Friday. We read it the week earlier, Parshas Zachar. Amar Shmuel, no. Ba refers to that day itself, Ba, just like we saw before, and therefore there is no raya. Rather, you read Parshas Zachar the next day on Shabbos itself. And now the Gemara continues. Again, we have Machlekes Rav and Shmuel without any answer. What happens Adar falls out, when Purim itself falls out on Shabbos, then what do you do? Amar Avuna Divrei Akol. Ein Makdimin. Everyone holds you don't read Parshas Zachar the week earlier, you read it right then and there. For Rav Nachman Amar Adayni Machlekes, says Rav Nachman, no, it is still a Machlekes. Rav still is going to hold, you're going to read it the week earlier. And now the Gemara explains just this opinion of Rav Nachman, it's Marnami Rav Chia bar Abba, Amar Rav Purim Shachalius B'Shabbos, Makdim V'Kar B'Shabbos Avra Zachar, just like Rav Nachman said that Rav argues even when Purim falls out on Shabbos itself. And that, excuse me, and that is the discussion of Parshas Zachar. What's next? Parshas Para. Bishlishes Parshas Para, says the Gemara, 10 lines from the bottom of Lamed Amud Aleph. Tanu Rabbanan Ezi Shabbos Shlishes. What is the third Shabbos? Kol Shesmucha LePurim Me'acharel. The week after Purim. Itmar Rav Cham bar Chanina Amar Shabbos Shesmucha Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Not the week after Purim, but Shabbos closes to Nisan. And the Gemara explains, Lo Pligi, and indeed these two shitas are not arguing that it's coming from two different approaches, two different vantage points. Ho Dikla Rosh Chodesh Nisan B'Shabbos adlikla b'emtza Shabbos. If it falls out during the week, then it's going to be the one closest to it. When it falls out, then it's going to be the week after Purim. When it falls out when Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out on Shabbos, then it'll be the one closest to it. Again, it's one of those things you have to look at a calendar, because if Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out on Shabbos, then that week will be Shabbos Parshas HaChodesh, and the week prior will be Parshas Para. And now, what is 4? Like we just mentioned, Baravi is HaChodesh Hazel Lochem, Parshas HaChodesh. Tanu Rabbana, we learned in our Braisa. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper again into these 4 incredible parashas. Rosh Chodesh Adar Shchalios b'Shabbos, Karin Kisisa Maftirim b'Yada, like we learned yesterday. V'ezi Shabbos v'Shayna Kol Shchol Rosh Chodesh Adar Liz b'Seicha. The week that Rosh Chodesh Adar is in that week. The week before, the Shabbos before, is Shabbos Zachar. V'afilu B'erev Shabbos, like we quoted this brayso earlier. V'Shniya Zachar, the second week is Zachar Maftirim Pakadati. V'ezi Shabbos Shniya Kol Shchol Purim Liz b'Seicha. Any week that the Purim is within it. V'afilu B'erev Shabbos. V'Shlish is the third parashas para adu maftirim v'zarakti aleichem v'ezi Shabbos shlish kol shmuch lepurim achrel. Baravi is what is the 4th parasha chodesh hazeh maftirim koyim Hashem elikim parisha v'echel chodesh, as we turn over to Lamid Amid Beis ve'ezu hi Shabbos Ravi, and what is the 4th Shabbos kol shchal Rosh Chodesh Nisan lias b'seicha v'afilu b'erev Shabbos, and therefore elaborating on what are the 4 lanings and the 4 haftarahs of the 4 special Shabbos of Zachar, of Zachar, Achodesh, Para, and Shkalim. I should say that better. Shkalim, Zachar, and Achodesh, and Para. Para and Achodesh, I said it wrong again. On the 5th week, we go back to regular order. So we read this in the Mishnah. This is a bit intriguing, because what exactly do you mean you go back to regular order? Because we're accustomed that what we actually do is we read the Shabbos Shkolim Zachar Par Nachodesh as an addition to the regular laning. So what exactly did the Mishnah mean that you go back to the regular order? Says the Gemara, let's see there my what order? So Rav Ami Amar let's see there Parshas Uchazer, Rav Yemi Amar let's see there Haftarahs Uchazer. So it seemingly is a fundamental machlekes. I don't think we spoke this out well yesterday. Whether they read the Parshas Shavua and read the special Shabbos in addition, that's what Rav Yirmiyah would hold, and therefore you're only going back to see their Haftarahs, which was interrupted. Now you go back to the regular Haftarah. Or Rav Ami said no, they didn't lane the Parshas Shavua at all. So they go back now to the regular Parshas Shavua. Amar Abaya, Kavasei Rav Ami, the Stavri brings a riot to Rav Ami. What did the Mishnah conclude? The Mishnah concluded that we pause and we interrupt all the regular readings for Rosh Chodesh, Chanukah, Purim, fastings, Mamadis, etc. So now the Gemara explains, if you're going to tell me that we interrupted the Parsha Shavua, now we're going back to the Parsha Shavua, I understand. This is a Parsha Shavua during the week. And now the Seder Mamadis and the Seder Taniyos make sense, because Tainis aren't on Shabbos. So Tainis are during the week. So what did you stop? What did you interrupt? The regular Parsha Shavua. So it makes sense that the whole Mishnah is in one theme. On the first wide line, they see there Haftarahs Uchazer. According to Rav Yirmiyah, they're going back to the Haftarahs. Haftarah b'chol mi'ika, the Mishnah doesn't read, it doesn't flow. Because when it comes to the end of the Mishnah, it's clearly referring to during the week. And you're learning that the first part of the Mishnah is only talking about Shabbos. And Rav Yirmiyah responds, Ve'edach, haketisa v'aketisa, no raya. Each part of the Mishnah is learned onto its own. Now the Gemara says, another question of Yirmiyah, B'taniya Islamali, why in fast days do you have to interrupt the Torah? Have Seika, Lamali of Seika, why are you pausing? Why in a fast day you have to not read the regular kriya? Let them read in the morning the regular relating of that day. In the afternoon they'll read for the Tainis Sibur. Says the Gemara, Messiah Rav Huna, they should bring back memories of Gemara and Tainis. So right, Rav Huna, what was the practice? What was the order that they did on a fast day? In the morning, they gathered everyone together and they dealt with what do they do? In the morning, the first half of the day, they dealt with communal affairs. The second half of the day, on the first quarter of the on the first quarter of the day, they read the Torah and they said the Haftarah. But first of all, already we see what was the proof what we were pointing out, that there's no no time to lane in the morning. In the morning they were dealing solely with communal matters. Raviyah Diyayim in the second quarter of the second half of the day, Ba'u Rachmi is when they would daven and beseech Hashem for mercy. Shtem Vikru B'Sefer Teiros Hashem Elokehem. Raviyah Sayoim Raviyah Sayoim is Vadim Mishtachimim. Ask the Gemara 1 second. Ve'iba Chana. Why need to switch it around? Why need to say that the first part of the day is when they would lane? Lo Sachadaitach for a different pasuk. T'chsev ve'ilai yasvu kol charad. The pasuk says, and to me they gathered together kol cherub b'divrei Elokei Yisrael al ma'ala goyla, on those that did averus in the galus v'ani yoshev mishaymam ad leminchas erev, and I sat speechbound and stunned until the afternoon. Uksiv but minchas erev kamti metanesi, in the afternoon I got up. So we see clearly then that morning they dealt with the communal affairs. The afternoon is when they laid, and therefore says the Gemara that's what we're gonna have to do according to our Mishnah as well, and that is the reason why you cannot change around the order, even according to Rav Yirmiyah. We'll pick it up from the Mishnah Amir Tashem in the next year.